Hi, and welcome to The Capsule Life, a show for the most casual and dedicated fans of comics and a member of the Comic Watch family. I'm your host, Sean. Join me and discover what the world of comics and graphic novels have to offer. From one-on-one interviews with industry professionals, roundtable discussions with passionate fans, and reviews on the latest comics, TV shows, and movies. Now let's dive right on in. Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, thanks for checking us out. And if you're a returning listener, thanks for coming back. In today's episode, we are discussing Marvel Studios' latest film, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I know many of you probably watched this, but for those of you who haven't yet or just want to know the details in general, here's the official synopsis and production details. Queen Ramonda, Shuri, M'Baku, Okoye, and the Dora Milaje fight to protect their nation from intervening world powers in the wake of King T'Challa's death. As Wakandans strive to embrace their next chapter, the heroes must band together with the help of War Dog Nakia and Everett Ross and forge a new path for the Kingdom of Wakanda. The movie was directed and written by Ryan Coogler, also written by Joe Robert Cole. It stars Letitia Wright as Shuri, Angela Bassett as Queen Ramonda, Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia, Dunai Gurira as Okoye, Winston Duke as M'Baku, Martin Freeman as Everett Ross, and Dominique Thorne as Riri Williams, and Tenoch Huerta as Namor. But before we get started with our review, we do have an awesome guest with us that will be adding their thoughts and insights about Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and that is Karama Horne. Also known as TheBlerdGurl, Karama is a Brooklyn, New York-based culture journalist, writer, podcaster, host, and critic parked at the intersection of geekdom and diversity. Karama has hosted red carpets, live streams, and comic convention. Let me try that again. In comic convention panels from New York to San Diego, and was featured in USA Today, The New York Times, The Guardian, The San Francisco Chronicle, and The Root. She has bylines at Marvel, Rotten Tomatoes, Nerdist, Mashable, Sci-Fi Wire, and The Wrap. And recently co-curated the sequential art exhibit, The Artist Experience from Brother Man to Batman at the Society of Illustrators in New York. Karama is also the founder of TheBlerdGurl, a site and podcast highlighting creators of color and genre entertainment. Follow Karama across social media at TheBlerdGurl. Karama, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you joining, and I apologize. I stumbled through that quite a bit.
Fine. You did great. I was surprised you read the whole thing. I was like, oh my God, he's reading the whole bio.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's very impressive, and I gotta be honest. So you and I connected through Twitter and TikTok, and I knew that you had a couple of things for Sci-Fi Wire, but I did not realize that you had such an extensive background and everything. Like, it was just really impressive to read all that. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, like you just done a little bit of everything. So I just more excited to have you on the show to talk about these things. So this is really cool. So thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate, taking the time to come and talk to us. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is that you have a book that's been out for a while called Protectors of Wakanda. Yeah,
book, yes.
And it's a great book.
Black Panther, Protectors of Wakanda, History and Training of the Dora Milaje. It's a mouthful, not my original title, but I'm very excited to Marvel reached out and asked me to write the origin story of the Dora Milaje, and I was so thrilled, and then I was even more thrilled when I found out that the book would drop right around the time of Wakanda Forever. So, yeah, this has been an exciting few weeks.
I bet. Yeah, no kidding. Well, what I like to do with every guest that comes on the show is to talk about a little bit of our comic book origin story. So I want to ask you, what was your comic book origin story? Was there somebody or something that got you into it? Was there an issue you picked up and read? Share with us a little bit about your origin story with comics.
Well, what's really funny is I'm the oldest and I'm the only girl, but I come from a geek household. So like we all grew up watching like Star Trek and Star Wars, Stargate, Star everything. And I used to joke, like, I think we're the only family I know with like a family Crunchyroll account. Like, this is weird. And so, but the interesting thing about it was we didn't live near a comic book shop, or if we did, my parents weren't like, they were like, we're not spending money on that. But we did have like video games and animation. So I was totally in on animation, totally in on sci-fi and fantasy. But I I think the concept of like collecting comics or getting, putting money into them didn't really hit me until later. I think I was in high school when high school or college, I can't remember. I think it was high school when somebody came in with their older brothers or father's copy. It was Spider-Man Annual number 16. And all
Mhm.
I knew is there was a black woman at the cover, even though her back was turned. I'm like, "Ooh, but I can tell an afro." So I was
Right.
like, "What is happening?" And I borrowed it from them, and that, for those of you who are collectors, Spider-Man Annual number 16
Mhm.
was the, first appearance of Monica Rambeau and Captain Marvel at
Oh,
the time,
yeah.
and I was just shocked. So, for comic book readers, annuals, well, I'm sorry, for non-comic book readers, annuals are like these graphic novels that have a beginning, middle, and end, but you don't necessarily have to read a whole bunch of other comics to
Mhm.
understand. It helps, but usually it's kind of like a Christmas special.
Right.
They come out once a year, and Doctor Who Christmas special. It's like a self-contained story,
Mhm.
and so um I was just shocked. Like, here comes Peter Parker, who his spidey senses go off, and he sees this woman about to be attacked, and he was like, "Do you need help?" And she was like, "No, I'm good." And she was like fighting off attackers and stuff. And I'm a big fan of characters that were not born with superpowers.
Mhm.
I love it that when they're like regular people or average everyday people
Mhm.
making everyday mistakes. Um, that then get powers or they get access and stuff. So that was her. She was a cop, and she ended up getting these powers.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing about that is just the whole concept of, okay, I've never seen myself in a comic.
Right.
So are there more? And then that's actually what sent me on my journey. I knew about Storm and stuff because, like I said, I was, watching animation and stuff.
Mhm.
But besides X-Men, besides that, and then that's when I fell down the rabbit hole of just I was really interested in characters that were not the big ones. Like, there was
Right.
a Superman, the Batman, and Wonder Woman. That's great, but who else we got? And I'm like, wait, Wonder Woman's got a twin sister. What? And what? So, and then then the first time I went to a comic book shop, and I was like, I have been deprived. I'm so upset because my childhood clearly was robbed of this, and but at the same time, it was really weird because like nobody would talk to me in a comic book shop because this was like back when like it was not cool for girls to just like comics. It was very weird.
Right,
And
yeah.
so um I was intimidated by the concept of like, let me go and buy every month. So I was
Mhm.
never that person that bought every month. I would find a shop, buy a bunch of things, and then that'd be it. I would read the stash that I had because I just didn't feel comfortable going in every month or having a subscription. It just didn't, I didn't, a lot of the places I went just weren't welcoming like that.
Mhm.
Then later, when, I'm old, when digital comics, came out, I was like, "Oh, I'm in heaven," So
Yeah.
now I still buy floppies, I still buy graphic novels, but I tend to buy digital first just because of the speed of which I can get my hands on them. And
Mhm.
then free comic book day and stuff like that, I will stock up on my, I'll fill up my long box. But I don't collect in a way that I collect to read. I collect because there's really good stories. I don't have a room full of completely fully appraised, mounted in glass. Like, I'm not that good. I'm
Right,
not that good.
right.
But um I am a fan, and I'm also a fan of like just all these amazing characters that and I also love finding a writer and then just following that writer
Mhm.
through a bunch of different comics, like even if it's not the same character. So
Right.
yeah, that's sort of my comic book story in a very long way.
Yeah. No, I love that because my own personal story and people have heard me talk about this all the time, but I grew up reading comics because of my uncle and then got away from it when I got into high school. But what
Mhm.
got me back into it 5 years ago was Marvel Unlimited when I downloaded that app, and it just changed the whole game for me. I was like, I want to get back into comics again. So I love that we kind of have that same experience with digital comics of opening that door for us. But what I love about your story is that was pretty much a key story about why representation matters, because your first comic was Monica Rambeau, and that, gravitating to you. Like, I love hearing that, and why, we need to see more people of color in comics and media and everything for that reason. And I would venture, we're probably around the same age. I know growing up, I didn't know a lot of
You're 97 also? Oh my God. You look so good for your age.
I have some friends that tell me that I've been, I'm been 25, for like the past 20 years or, 15 years and all that. I'm like, yeah, sure. That I'll go by that. Right. But, growing up, like, I gotta say, I share that sentiment of I didn't know a lot of women who were into comics, but at the same time, it just like what you said, it was kind of a weird thing, because I never thought about, is this person I know into comics or not, because it's just never really something that was really like discussed.
I tell people all the time, like, we were always there, but the dudes were never checking for us. They were looking at the girls that were into sports and stuff. So everybody, the nerds, the jocks, everybody was all looking at the popular girls. They were not looking at the rest of us that were reading comics. We were there, but we weren't. We were what was popular.
Right. Right.
And I also had like super thick glasses and everything. Like, technology is powerful. Like, I can now see and not look like a crazy person. But yeah, it's just I honestly think that because I talked to so many women who were like, why does everybody think we didn't exist? And I'm like, because they just weren't talking to us.
Yeah. No, and I agree, because I bet you there were people, and it's just like we said, it was just part of the culture growing up. Like, we just didn't think that, because it was just always, leaned into the stereotypes of, like, the boys were into the comics and the girls weren't, for whatever reason.
And exactly. And also I was going to say media, because, there was, I was trying to explain Toys R Us to my niece the other day. I was like, so there was a store that had toys, and there was a boy aisle and a girl aisle.
Yeah.
And and so she's like, you don't buy toys on the computer? I'm like, yeah, okay. Yes, we do now.
Yeah.
But toys don't actually come out of the computer. It's
right.
Okay.
Yeah. You went to a physical store. If you wanted video games, they're behind a cage. Like, somebody had to open the cage for you. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Tune in next month when I try to explain her what a phone booth is. It's gonna be gonna be painful.
I'm sure. Yeah. You need to tell her about 3.5 floppy disk, and like why they were called 3.5 and floppy. Yeah.
Oh my God. No, what's really funny? I have a friend whose father played a prank on his grandchildren. He brought a rotary phone to Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh,
and
yeah.
was like, plugged it in and was like, dial a number. Kids were like, what? Like, do you talk at, like, what do we do? It was so funny.
Oh, it's so great. Oh my gosh, I love that. Oh. Well, let's talk a little bit about your professional career, because, as I've read, you have an impressive journey and career so far. And it sounds like it stems from when you created your blog called TheBlerdGurl. And so I wanted to kind of ask you, how did you get to that point where you decided to write a blog? And since you've opened that up, like, how did that kind of take off to allow you these opportunities that you're doing now?
So it's really kind of weird. And I tell everybody, people are like, oh, like, you should teach people how to do what you do. I'm like, I'm still trying to figure out how I do what I do. But if anybody, there's no blueprint for this. So I basically I'm actually a video editor by trade, like, or former, I should say. I used to edit commercials for promos and like ad agencies and things like that. And so that was sort of like my day job, but I've always been a geek, like I said. And so remember how I said, oh, I went down this rabbit hole of like finding cool characters and really interesting art and following writers and people. My friends, I was driving them crazy. So someone was like, you should start a blog. And then I was like, and then there was somebody else said, you should start a Tumblr, because again, old. And so, so Tumblr was huge, and also really big for art, because it was sort of like pre-Instagram, really.
Right.
And so I had TheBlerdGurl was a Tumblr page where I literally would just post art that I found of artists that I found that were really interesting. Characters of color. I remember doing like a deep dive on Echo, which makes me crack up that Echo's getting her own
Oh,
show because nobody
yes.
knew who the hell Echo was when I was yelling about her. And so, and now I have people like, let me tell you something about Echo. I'm like, wow, okay. And I just find that so funny because I'm like, but I was really into like a lot of these characters. I was yelling about Darwin,
Mm,
the X-Men Darwin, because
right.
to this day I hate X-Men First Class
Yeah.
for that very reason, because they
Yeah.
killed Darwin, and I will never get over it because Darwin has the powers of like not just regeneration, but like the earth. Like he went to hell and became hell. Like he can I
Oh,
just like
interesting. I
he
didn't
could
know
like
that. Yeah.
he swallowed a planet at one point, and I'm like, but then like Footloose shows up and shoots him in the face, and now I was so mad. I was
Yeah.
so mad. If I ever meet Kevin Bacon, I'm gonna like hit him just for that because I'm just so upset. So I'm like, that movie was horrible because
Yeah.
Darwin deserved better. So I used to talk about stuff like that on Tumblr and events, smaller Comic Cons, and artists that I would find that I would go, does anybody else know where I can find more work by this person? So
Mhm.
that's how it started. And then I started writing articles on there, which Tumblr isn't really great for, but one of them kind of went viral. And I was like, ooh, okay, so let's make this actually a legit WordPress site. I started other sites before. So
Mhm.
it was just really crazy that I started this WordPress site and started talking about um really comics, conventions, being a fan, some of the
Mhm.
stupid stuff that happens in these spaces.
Mhm.
And it just kind of took off, and it took off, I think, because of what you said. Like, first, I had just people like, I don't know any women who talk about comics, and then it was
Mhm.
like, I don't know any black women that talk about comics, and then there were people that were like, I just don't know any black people, and I'm like, I can't help with half of these, but okay.
Right.
And it was just it was just interesting having this dialogue about being a nerd, and that like the term black nerd or blurred, when I first used it, it was just a kind of call sign on message boards and on Tumblr for those of us who were just like, hey, are you like black? Are you like anime? Or are you like, Asian or Latino? Are you like comics and stuff? And it was just sort of a call sign to say, like, this is a safe space. No one's going to question why you're here. And
Mhm.
that was where it sort of came from. I think it's grown into something else, but
Right.
that's when we're using it like 150 years ago, because I'm 97. Um, that's what it was for. And so the WordPress site kind of took off, but I didn't really lean into it. I didn't really try and monetize it. I didn't do all that. It was just my hobby where I just yelled about stuff.
Right.
And then I said, you know what would be great is if I could start shining a light on more and more creators. So I started a podcast and I started a YouTube channel, and I
Mhm.
started using them the way I saw other outlets utilize. So I would go to events and I would interview people. I had my little Zoom mic, and then that would be a podcast, or I would start, use my camera, or my phone or whatever, and interview people and then edit it because I knew how to edit. I would,
Mhm.
edit stuff for my YouTube channel. And then I didn't realize what I was doing was sort of building a reel for myself, because I never
Right.
thought of myself as doing this for a living. Listen, had I known I could like read comics and like review movies for a living, high school would have gone very differently.
Right. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I was so much cooler.
Yeah.
So, I just had in 2017 or 2016, really, I just had my worlds collide where I was an independent contractor editor for a New York based company, and they were subcontracted with Sci-Fi Wire
Mhm.
to edit a bunch of ads about San Diego Comic-Con, as well as edit the live shows out at San Diego Comic-Con. And I was
Mhm.
like, they were like, I remember being in a room full of people and somebody going, does anybody know any editors that know anything about comics? And like my assistant was like, have you ever talked to Karama ever? Like, and so they were like, oh yeah, great. So we all went out, and it was just like a bunch of us in a room. I don't know if you've ever been to San Diego Comic-Con, but there's
Mm-mm.
the big hotel that is right next to the convention center. And we were just like
Mhm.
all in this one floor, and every room was a different thing. Like, and I was in
Right.
the edit room with a bunch of other people with a bunch of gear and cables all over the place, just pulling footage down from the live feed that was happening on the floor of people going, hey, I'm standing here at the Batman booth, or interviews happening on a live stage or whatever. We'd have to cut them down to like bite-sized pieces for social or so I sort of became a de facto producer, because when you're working a freelance on location gig, you get people from all over the place and they don't always know the content. So there was people be like, somebody tell me what Disney character that is. And I'm like, that's Naruto. That's not, what are
Right.
you doing? Who's that old man on the screen? Like, oh, that's Peter Capaldi. That's
Right.
Doctor Who. That's also not how you spell doctor. What is happening? So I turned into sort of like this mini producer, because there was just a bunch of people in a situation that they didn't know about. So by
Right.
the end of that, I basically sort of secured a little bit of a job with Sci-Fi Wire, and I began producing some stuff for them, some small content for them. And then someone was like, hey, do you have any on-camera stuff? Because you're pretty good. And I was like, well, I have this YouTube channel. And that sort of turned into my little reel. And then they were like, well, we're going to be doing some live events. Let's pull you out of the room and maybe you could do some live interviews, which I'd been doing because I had my podcast and stuff. And so I got to go to like New York Comic Con and San Diego Comic Con and C2E2 and Emerald City Comic Con and a lot of amazing places, 2016, 2017, 2018, and interview some incredible people. I got to talk to Chris Claremont, and I got to talk to, it's funny, some of the comics that we were gonna, I think, talk about tonight, I got to talk to some of those creators. And I had a column at Sci-Fi for about 2 years called Indie Comic Spotlight, where I would just talk about indie comics. Because again, that was my thing. That was my jam. Like Batman and Superman are great, but there's this amazing creator over here that's doing some amazing work. And also a lot of the big two artists and writers did a lot of their own independent work.
Right.
So I just was able to sort of lean into the independent projects. And what was awesome about it was when people got bigger deals, I was able to interview them with their bigger projects. So that's how my interview with Keanu Reeves came about, because I didn't know him, but but Boom Studios, who did his comic, had a lot of indie comic creators that I'd worked with and interviewed. And like, I would highlight some of the really, really tiny people. So when it came to do this, they were like, hey, would you like to interview Keanu Reeves? I'm like, I'm sorry, it's a podcast. I can't see my face. So I was like, oh my God, what?
Yeah.
So, and then, it's just sort of snowballed from there. Ace Comic Con saw the work that I did with Sci-Fi, asked me to interview some people. They were like, would you like to talk to Chris Hemsworth again? And honestly, people are like, oh, you look so calm on stage. I'm like, yes, but inside, I'm like,
yeah. Freaking out, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So, but yeah, and so that it kind of snowballed, and then it's just really funny. 2018 really blew me up, because what happened was I went from like relative obscurity to the first Black Panther movie coming out, and everybody going, does anybody know any Black people that know anything about comics? Because no one wanted to be on the red carpet without some type of representation.
Right.
And so Sci-Fi actually sent me to the first red carpet for Black Panther, and that was amazing. And that opportunity, and I don't think people realize, like, when you're on a red carpet and when you get to do those junkets, you get to meet all of the people and the handlers and the managers and the producers and the reps and the marketing teams behind a lot of the bigger places. And that's where you get the access. And that's where you can like really push forward your career, especially if you're trying to like do entertainment journalism and stuff.
Right.
And I hadn't, until that point, like when I started doing those live stages, I was like, you know what? I could do this. Like, I know the stuff and I love this. And I had no idea that this was a job. So yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the better part of 2019 was amazing. Like, I traveled all over the place, talked to some incredible people, and then 2020 happened and the bottom fell out of everything.
Right.
And we all joined TikTok, and here we are.
Yeah. And that's fascinating, because I think that's, like I said, we connected on Twitter and TikTok, and it just seems like TikTok was like the thing that everybody did. I don't know why. I don't even remember. I remember TikTok was like Musically at first, and I think that's how I heard about
Yes.
it first, and then TikTok bought them, and I can't remember like how I joined TikTok, but it seems like that's what everybody did in 2020 was they joined TikTok. But
Well, I think the nice thing about TikTok was that like Instagram, everything has to be like perfect and pretty and like
yes,
it's like the front of the store. And I feel
right,
like TikTok is like the stock room. Like we're all
yeah.
hanging out, we're all drinking, we're all like, I don't know what's happening next, but what did you watch last night? And I just thought that was like, I liked that vibe. And I just needed that in 2020 because I was like, I don't think I'm leaving my house ever again.
Yeah. Well, and it made video creation more accessible for people because I saw one of the things that impressed me because I'm not at your level of video editing whatsoever, but I do video editing, like as a freelance and things like that.
Mhm.
And one of the things I was really impressed with TikTok is how it gave people a way to create content without it being professional quality video. So you can do audio, then you can put text over it. So it's like, these video memes basically. And I thought that was a
Mhm.
brilliant thing that had made TikTok so successful is that you didn't have to worry about having all these things look professional quality to
That's what
tell
was
a story.
amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I love hear your story about how that one blog post got into on Tumblr of all things, right? Which Tumblr, I guess, is coming back because of everything that's going on with Twitter. So that's
Yeah,
an
like now
interesting
everybody's going back. Like this time next year, I'll be like, "Where's your Tumblr?" Yeah,
thing.
it's all.
Yeah.
But that was the one thing that I learned. Like, you just have to be malleable. Like, yes, do I have
hmm
the majority of my followers on Twitter? Yes, but there's a reason for that. I've spent the last 5 or 6 years writing and
hmm
being a journalist. So if you're a journalist, you got to be on Twitter because it's words. Like
Right.
that's what it started out. Before pictures, it was words, and
Right.
so that's where you would and I just I would do a lot of live tweeting of shows.
hmm
And one of the things I did that helped me, which a lot of people are also doing on other platforms now, was it when comic book shows would come out, like Luke Cage, like Daredevil, like whatever, we would
hmm
live tweet the shows, like a bunch of us as friends, and then start putting up comic book covers, like, oh, this is when this happened.
Yeah.
Oh, this is when that happened. And like,
Yeah.
and we just started doing that with other things. I remember doing that with Luke Cage, and then I also remember just even doing that with history for things like Lovecraft Country and
Yeah.
and Watchmen. Watchmen blew my mind because Watchmen was my two favorite things, which was like comics and history.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm in my element. And then my third favorite thing is Yahya Abdul Mateen the second. So, I was in heaven. But like just storytelling got really, really interesting because we're all having these conversations, and I think that type of storytelling and conversations are now happening on places like TikTok and
Right.
Instagram Live and things like that.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and just like you said, all this is just that it's centered around that human need for connections. And I think that's what social media has been able to, for better or for worse, has been able to allow us to connect to people that we couldn't be able to in our own physical places, right?
Exactly.
Like a lot of my friends now are people that I met online first before actually meeting in person. And so it's really fascinating just to kind of see how you've been able to, create a community based on, something that everybody loves and something that you're passionate about, and how technology, social media has been able to just kind of help, spread that. So I love hearing that. In addition to that, like we had talked about before, you wrote your book Protectors of Wakanda. It's
Mhm.
a book about Dora Milaje, and I know we're going to review Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and we're getting to that, but I want to talk about your book a little bit first. Just to talk about, well, first of all, I read it and I thought it was a great book, and I love so many things about it.
Thank you.
One of the things I love is how it's such a journal. Like you leaned into make it look like a journal because it has like all those little side notes and stuff like that. And so it felt like less of a book and more of like a living document type of thing.
And
And
that
I
was
was
that
just,
was the goal, and I really
yeah,
appreciate that. I'm glad you saw that.
yeah. No, I absolutely love like it was really fun because some of my favorite books are of that style. Like one of my favorite books is a novel called Ireland. And when it was printed, it's a story about how a boy is following these tales that this storyteller would go around the country of Ireland and tell about the history of Ireland. But the printed book has like these ripped edges and stuff like that. And I just remember that always stuck with me of like how publishers think about not just like typing a book and printing on a page, but to take that medium and to figure out, how to make it really interesting and engaging. And I love how this was a journal and being able to see all the side notes, because now it's not just, it's something that I felt like I was reading something that the Dora Milaje had put together as a whole group and everything. But I just love all the details that went into it. It was so interesting to hear about the history of the Black Panther and the Dora Milaje and Wakanda. And I felt like it is a great book if if you're somebody who's like, I don't know where to start with comics if I want to get into Wakanda or Black Panther. This is a great book to kind of get a primer on the history of that entire world. And I just absolutely love this. So I want to kind of give you some time to talk about what is that book, like how did it come about, and just anything you want to share with us, because I want to hear anything from you about your project here.
But I'm so happy that you really like it. So
Mhm.
yeah, the way Protectors of Wakanda came about is I did something you should not do. So somebody reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to write a book about the Dora Milaje?" Somebody from Marvel. And I said, "I'm sorry, me? Are you sure?" That's what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say yes and thank you. So
Right.
I would, to be honest, I was confused because, like I said, I work as a journalist interviewing comic book creators and writers on a regular basis. So
Mhm.
the person that reached out to me was reaching out to me on behalf of Marvel, but their handle wasn't Marvel.
Okay.
So I thought they were asking me to interview somebody who'd written a book about the Dora Milaje. Like I thought that's what was happening,
Oh, yeah,
and I was
yeah.
like, Me? Wait, no, wait." I don't understand. Am I interviewing? What is happening?" Like, no, no, no. We want you to write the book. And so, for those who don't know, Marvel. Okay, so first of all, we've got several things that are different here. Disney and MCU are the movies, right? They're
Right.
also like Disney Plus. Then you have Marvel Comics, which is where all these characters came from.
Mhm.
Then you have Marvel Prose. And what prose means is like there's non-comics, they're not comic books, they might have pictures in them, but they're not considered comic books. So
Okay.
mine is a YA novel, and it's just actually between you and me, it's got a lot more pictures than I thought it was going to have.
Okay.
'Cause I thought it was going to have a lot less pictures. And when I saw the final, I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot. So, but it was the concept of the book was basically the when Marvel often works with multiple publishers,
Mhm.
and my publisher is Becker and Mayer, which is imprint of Quarto. Now,
Okay.
Becker and Mayer has another book out that's basically a Jedi manual.
Mhm.
And they were like, "Would you like to do something about the Dora Milaje that's similar to this Jedi manual, like Train to Be a Jedi?" And I'm like, "Yes, but there's infinitely more information about becoming a Jedi that's already in the wider universe of Star Wars
Right.
than there is about Wakanda." And they were like, "Exactly. That's what you're gonna come up with." I'm like, "Wow, okay." Um, and when I decided to write the book, I was, you always have to give them an outline. And I was like, I have never done this before. I don't know how I outline how I would, not the mechanics of outlining a book, just like I've never written for Marvel before. I don't know what they're looking for. So
Right.
what I went to was, I think many people have probably seen like the images of the Dora Milaje like show that gets put on at Disney World,
Mhm.
and all the women that come out and they have all the outfits and everything. They talk to the kids. Well, there's
Mhm.
a whole set of tenets that they always recite to the kids, and they are tradition, honor, strength, courage, and compassion. And so I said, you know what? I'm gonna make that the outline of the book. Like there's gonna be these different areas
Mhm.
that if that's the Dora Milaje code, just like the Jedi code, if this is the Dora Milaje code, let's make that the outline and then like shape it around that. And
Right.
then from there, I decided it was interesting. Marvel doesn't really tell you what you can't do. They just kind of let you run until you hit the fence.
Right.
And so I what I wanted to establish was like who was going to be talking in the book
Right.
and why they were talking before what they were saying.
Mhm.
So I said like, all right, or the origin of the Dora Milaje, Christopher Priest, got that.
Mhm.
They also said, are you gonna include the previous Black Panthers? I was like, I would love to. Can I include all of them? Like from Ta-Nehisi Coates' run, Actually, it was Jonathan Hickman in Fantastic Four who made him King of the Dead, and
Oh,
that gave him access to all of his past Black Panthers, like like Avatar, The
yeah,
Last Airbender can
yeah.
access all of his last. So that's something that Jonathan Hickman did in a Fantastic Four run that was after, it was kind of after Doom War
Mhm.
because they were like rebuilding Wakanda. And then speaking of
Yeah,
Doom War had it was the birth of the Midnight Angels. The
right,
Ta-Nehisi Coates reinvented them, but I remember early on having conversations. They're like, we don't really want to necessarily acknowledge Doom War because it's not necessarily canon to this universe. And I'm like, then I can't talk about the Midnight Angels because that's where they came from. And
right.
they were like, oh, right. Okay, you can use them. And so it was like, but that's the thing with the Dora. There are people that you never heard of, and then they just pop up at like one book. Hickman is good for this. If I ever meet Jonathan Hickman, I have a bone to pick with him because he just randomly named 2 Kings of Wakanda, just made them up and dropped them in another Fantastic Four book.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and then Jason Aaron randomly came up with a couple of their kids, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, "This is." So the whole first part of the book really turned into it like a thesis.
Right,
So
yeah.
I look like Charlie from the Always Sunny in Philadelphia
Oh,
with the
yeah.
red string. I was
In the
like,
mailroom, yeah.
yes. I was like, it was a mess. So I that was a lot of work that I had to do to get, because I also, fanboys will tear you up if you don't do it right.
Right.
Even though I was gonna have Marvel looking over everything,
Mhm.
there's still things that'll fall through the cracks and then you get dragged all over the social media for it.
Right.
Um, but I wanted to give an accurate description of the Kings of Wakanda, which had been listed in the comics, but
Mhm.
they had not been listed in what order, and they had not been their stories hadn't been told
Right.
outside of T'Chaka and a little bit about Nahanda. But so that I got to do that. So that part was really fun. I just knew Marvel was going to rip that to pieces and go, yeah, you can't do all this. And they were like,
Mhm.
great. I was like, okay. And so I was just shocked. So that was really the hardest part of the book. The
Mhm.
most fun part of the book was the fight scenes and the
Yeah.
weapons. And because like I said, grew up a geek watching anime, also grew up watching Sunday morning, martial arts stuff with my dad. And so it was just, the whole second part of the book was just Enter the Wu-Tang. So um the the I just it was really important to me also to, and it's really funny because as with all books, you have pages that get edited out, and it's like, if I get to do a deluxe edition, I really, really, really want to put this page back in.
Mhm.
There was a page that was Okoye just talking, and she's basically explaining the time period that the book takes place in.
Mhm.
Basically, this book is supposed to be a journal that is every Dora gets when they go into the school, and they learn from it, but they also, their classmates and all kinds of other people can make notes in it and stuff. And then when they
Mhm.
graduate, they hand this journal back to a Dora that is starting her journey.
Mhm.
And so this particular journal was supposed to have been found near the necropolis after the floods of Namor, after the battle with basically the intergalactic. Remember when the intergalactic saga of Black Panther? I don't know if you know this or not, but in the comics, there was a whole other planet of Wakanda that was found.
Right.
And it's sort of like a Days of Future Past kind of situation where people were sent to find vibranium out in space, and they fell through a wormhole and
Mhm.
couldn't get back home, and started a whole, but it was time traveling. They basically went to the past,
Right.
and this group of explorers basically started Wakanda over again,
Mhm.
but turned it into this intergalactic empire that was like, they were like oppressors and everything. They were horrible people, and there was a
Mhm.
whole group, but the one lore that everybody knew, even in this entirely different dimension, was the legend of T'Challa, because the people who had settled were all talking about their king. So
Mhm.
so T'Challa at one point goes to search for what happened to these people, falls to the wormhole, ends up a slave in this universe and has to fight his way back out. And
Mhm.
it was just a fascinating second part of of Ta-Nehisi Coates' run.
Mhm.
But Wakanda, the intergalactic planet, and I mean, sorry, the galaxy, as well as Wakanda Prime in Africa on Earth, end up colliding because that wormhole comes to Earth, and so we've got all kinds of people. So at the end of this huge battle, at the end of Ta-Nehisi Coates' run,
Mhm.
is basically when this book takes place, because we've been through World of Wakanda that was written by Roxane Gay, but Mistress Zola, as you know, the headmistress of the school, she was killed during that run. Spoiler
Mhm.
alert. And so um Okoye says, we now not only have to rebuild our ranks, we have people from all over the galaxy that are considered Wakandans.
Mhm.
We have to rebuild the school. I am appointing a new headmistress. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we have to do. And our this journal that was found by a fallen Dora, we need to add to it so that this next generation
Mhm.
knows what we know. And so
Right.
and I'm sad that that wasn't able to be included, but I still think people kind of get that from it.
Mhm.
Um, and so that part was really fun. And then I think the most important chapters in the book to me were actually compassion and courage, because I
Mhm.
think everybody just sees these women as like these warrior women and that's all they do.
Right.
Um when sometimes you have to have the courage not to fight, and sometimes you also have to wait to see what is worth fighting for.
Mhm.
Um and compassion is also like that downtime. Like, you have to mourn, you have to take care of your body, you have to take care of your mind. And I think these are all like universal concepts
Mhm.
that whether or not, you're talking about the door, you're talking about like yourself, are kind of like important. And so I was really excited to put all of this in here. And they don't let you dedicate books when they're licensed.
Oh,
But in
really?
in my mind, this is dedicated to my niece, and hopefully one day she's like 4, and hopefully one day when she's at school, I will be the cool show and tell,
Yeah.
and the cool auntie, that did something for Marvel. But yeah, I just my big thing was really just creating this backstory and then connecting the dots. There's really very little of this book that doesn't have a genesis in the comics somewhere.
Mhm.
But sometimes it was a really obscure story. Sometimes it was a one shot. But it did already exist in the comics. And what I tried to do was take stories that comic book readers already knew about Black Panther and
Right.
put the Dora in them, like give that, like, this is what the Dora were doing when T'Challa was
Yeah.
doing that.
Right.
And then also make a really interesting story for people who never read the comics, only know the movies, and are just trying to wrap their heads around like where all of this came from.
Mhm. Yeah. And I have to say that I have only read probably a few issues of Black Panther, and I appreciate what you said that with that because reading the book did make me appreciate a lot more about the rich history of, like I said, Black Panther, Wakanda, and Dora Milaje. And I gotta say, personally, after I read that book, and I don't know if you saw my TikTok about this because
I
I created
did,
this
I did.
TikTok.
Thank
Good.
you.
I think it would be. I loved learning about the 4 years of the oh my gosh, the words escaping me, so I apologize, but like the novitiate, when they're going through the training and everything.
Oh, the Kanwata, yeah.
Yes, the Kanwata, thank you. Yes. I think that would be a great Marvel Studios like special presentation where they can do an hour of somebody kind of going through that process, because I think it was very neat to be able to tell a story of that process and kind of go through the different things that they would go through and how each stage it gets elevated. But like you said, the pictures with the weapons were really cool. I thought that was really fascinating. But the tenet of compassion, like you said, really spoke out to me, because I think just like what you said, that's one of the things that we don't see the Dora Milaje enough as is that they are very compassionate people, but we always see them, at least in the media with, being in battles and things like that, that's actually the strongest power that they have is being able to know, like what you said, being able to know when do they need to fight and who's like their enemy and things like that. And I think that's what, the movie we're going to talk about is one of those ways of how that's really kind of shown through is compassion has to be one of those core tenets that's balances all those other things out as well too. So
I've only seen it once. I've only seen it once in the media, and that was in Falcon and Winter Soldier
yes,
when in the flashback when Io was working with Bucky and trying to break him of his programming.
right.
And she's very calmly talking to him, explaining, and he's
Hmm.
like, "I don't know if I'm ready." And she's like, "You are. We can do this.
Yeah,
You are. You can." And I kept thinking, how did she come up with that? How did she know to do this training? How did she know, like, where did the concept of this mental training to fight programming come from? I'm like, they would have had to train in this. They would
right.
have had to know this in order for her to teach it and be confident that Bucky wouldn't just lose it and kill her. She
Hmm.
would have to, have, although it's very clear that they have fail safes for everything, as it was also evidenced in when they
Yeah.
when she took off Bucky's arm like an ATM. It
Yeah.
was very clear that they've got fail safes for stuff. So, but that was a moment of compassion. There was just these little tiny moments that I've said
Mhm.
that I was wondering, where did that come from? Why how would they know that? Then the other thing I wanted to know is, what happens if they don't die on the battlefield?
Right,
Like, we haven't seen any older Dora yet, but, like, they do exist in the comics, and I
right.
was like, what happened if she just 62 with bad knees? Like, what does she do? Where does she go?
Yeah, yeah.
And then, because 'cause they've got a wealth of knowledge,
Yeah,
like, they're not gonna just kill them,
right.
So, that was the other thing I wanted to learn about, and then I think the thing I'm most proud of in the book was the fact that I was able to create their actual origin story. I was able to take,
Mhm.
Nahanda, who is one of 2 women Black Panthers, um, and who is an older, character that was created by Ta-Nehisi Coates. So I will say this, she's not older chronologically in the comics, she's older historically in the
Right,
comics.
right.
And, other writers have written about her. Jason Aaron had her running around with Thor,
Mhm.
and Thor's father, like,
Right.
fighting. So I think there's a Gore the God Butcher story where she's in the background.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's a bunch of uh stories where, and I was like, if she is that old, but not the first Panther, obviously, but if she's that old and she's one of the only women Panthers, there's a story there.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I said, wouldn't it be fascinating if she was the founder of the Dora?
yeah.
And the concept of how did that get turned into and what was great about it was there was a real life story I was able to pull it from. There's in South Africa, there's a real tribe of people called the Mujaji. I take that back. There's a rain goddess called the Mujaji, and
Mhm.
her worshipers, are called the Mujaji, but it's a matrilineal priesthood. And so it's
Oh,
only
okay.
women that become the priests, and they're born into this.
Right.
And one of the older Mujaji priestesses, and I don't have I've never found on record who it was, whether that it was like a brother, a cousin, a father, but it was someone related to her that was a male that tried
Mhm.
to kill her because he didn't think a woman should be in the throne.
Mm.
And she, from that point on, only had women
Mhm.
around her, only had women guards, and she took a woman from every tribe
Mhm.
to like keep the peace,
Right.
and she called them her wives. They were never actually her wife. Like, there was nothing sexual about it, but the
Right.
concept was they're betrothed to me. Their lives have been given to me.
Right.
And so I just read that story and I was like, that's the Dora Milaje origin story.
That's so
That's
cool.
it right there. And
Yeah.
so I basically transposed that into basically Nahanda being the first woman panther and someone in the court trying to kill her, and one of her servants saving her life,
Mhm.
and she immediately making her the first Dora, her and her other servant the first Dora, and then taking a barren woman from every tribe
Right.
because they would already be treated probably unfairly because they weren't able to bear children,
Right.
and made them her guards and called them her adored ones.
Yeah.
So how did that get turned into then other people saying, and then lines change, history changes, and as more there was another male leader that
Hmm.
said, yeah, we're actually going to say that if you give me somebody from each of your tribes could actually become my wife, they might be able to become queen. This is before T'Chaka. So I tried to also pull that story to end up at the thread where Christopher Priest started,
Hmm.
which was, these are the Dora Milaje, they're betrothed, they only speak Hausa, only speak to the king. And
Hmm.
so it's sort of like writing a prequel when there's things that are, it's like Andor, where you're going to end up. But
Yeah.
so but that was, I think, the thing I'm most proud of, because that was the one thing that I thought they would make me change, and they left it. And I was like, I remember the day that I found that out, I just cried because I was like, I just created canon.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I'm sorry, I
No,
didn't curse, but I was
that's
like,
okay. That's okay.
I was like stunned.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm super excited that I was able to I don't, it's so funny. People are like, so what's the next book? I'm like, Jesus, let me just handle
Let me
this
enjoy
one.
this one. Yeah. Well, and I gotta say, I love that whole story about how she picked Adore Milaje as, identifying people who has probably been outcast and giving them, a not just like a role and purpose, but something that is probably honorable among all the whole country. Like I absolutely loved reading that part. Like I remember, like, of all the historical figures that we went through, that one stood out for me the most because I thought that was just such a great, a great, action of love that that person had created, out of necessity, but also to be able to, provide that for people who probably most need it, in their country. And I absolutely love that story. So I gotta say, I'm a fan of that. I'm glad that that was your own personal part of the canon and that it made it in there now. So that's so cool. I love that. So I hope we get to see more of that later on in future stories of Black Panther.
Yeah, I would love to see like a comic created about her, or like,
Yeah.
I know they're in talks. Disney Plus is definitely doing a story with Denai Guerrera as Okoye, but
Hmm.
no one knows what it's going to be yet. So
Right.
no one knows if it's really a Dora Milaje show or if it's just about Okoye. Like, we don't know.
Right.
So, but I would love some of that history or something like that to be in there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love that too. Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate talking to you about Protectors of Wakanda. And so now we're going to switch gears a little bit to talk about Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Okay.
So, for just like all of our review episodes, there's going to be spoilers here. So, if you have not watched the movie, just please be prepared that we're going to talk about that. So,
We're
let's
going to
go ahead and,
spoil it.
yes, we are definitely going to spoil it. So, if you don't want that, go ahead and leave now. But let's go ahead and jump in and say, what was your overall thoughts about the movie? I know you got to see it, I think a week or two ago, but want to
Yeah,
get your
I have now seen it 3 times.
awesome.
Um, so the first time it was like, just a gut punch.
Hmm.
I cried throughout most of it.
Hmm.
Um, it was still a gut punch the second time, but I think by the third time I was able to really, I every time I see it, I've seen something new. And I definitely think, yes, even though it's a long movie, it is definitely worth multiple viewings because it's so full of symbolism.
Right.
Um, so I loved it. I thought it was a beautiful emotional tribute to Chadwick, as well as honoring the rest of the cast,
Hmm.
because principal photography had started on this movie before Chadwick died.
Right.
So it wasn't just a course correct. They had to stop
Right.
and like come up with a whole other thing. And the other thing that I also can't stop thinking about is what a 2020 movie this is. Like, the
Hmm.
movie, he died in 2020. They were shooting in 2020. Um the things that were going on in the real world at the same time that they were shooting, um the concept of grief, and how a lot of us have spent the last 3 years like not really being able to grieve. Like, I know I lost people to COVID. I know so many people who lost people to COVID and to illness. I know people who lost people through the protests or whatever. And we've
Hmm.
never just been allowed to grieve. It was sort of like you're locked in your house and now we're just gonna come back out. Thank God it's over. Like,
Hmm.
but it's not. Like, we're different. We've come out of this different. And
Right.
just that whole ritual of being able to like burn the mourning clothing and things like that. These like it really was it was I think the movie really felt like an emotional journey. That's
Mhm.
like the fan part of me. The
Mhm.
the critic part of me does feel that it was a bit too long. Like, I don't think it needed to be 2 hours. I'm glad it was as long as it was because,
Right.
we got to settle into some things and not race through some stuff, but
Mhm.
the critic in me was like, "Ah, it could have been 20 minutes shorter," you know?
Right.
Um, but I don't hate it. I think it did, and I was explaining this to somebody, earlier, that many times in the Black Baptist church, it goes on for like 3, 4 hours. Like on Sundays, you're in church for 3 hours, and you got repast, which is food afterwards. You spend all day in church. Did
Mhm.
you have to be there that long? No, but it feels good.
You're right.
And
Yeah.
so that's sort of that's what I'm saying. This is like an emotional story. Now,
Mhm.
I will absolutely say that, in terms of characterization and things like that, Tenoch Huerta as Namor, oh my god, he embodied this character.
Yes.
Um, really, really loved his portrayal, the portrayal of Tenochtitlan, the Namora, all of them. Like, I mean, their designs were just ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It was
the
fantastic.
I liked, I also really liked Shuri's journey. I knew just from what I was seeing and hearing that we were going to, they were going to just accept the fact that T'Challa was gone. That was going
Mhm.
to be part of the storyline, and then we are going to move on. But uh that concept of we need to grieve and Shuri not being able to grieve and actually taking that journey, I thought I actually thought that Letitia Wright did a fantastic job.
Mhm.
And now what I know more about like the injuries that she sustained on set and stuff, that was a lot. She had mental stuff she had to get through, physical stuff she had to get through.
Right.
Um, Another favorite was Winston Duke as M'Baku, who was like comic
Mhm.
relief, but also the voice of reason. He was
Yeah.
hilarious though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the Academy Award has to go to Angela Bassett
Yes.
for Ramonda. Like
Oh, yeah.
I think I only have 2 issues with the film, and that was she didn't have to die.
Yeah, right.
That didn't have to happen.
Uh-huh.
In my mind, it didn't have to happen. Like, because in the comics, there are several things that have happened to her, and one, she was gravely injured and left in a coma for a
Mhm.
really long time, but she recovered. I
Mhm.
feel like they could have done that. I
Right.
feel like they didn't have to kill her. But I also heard a rumor, I don't have proof of this, but I did hear a rumor that she just wanted that Angela Bassett wanted out of her contract. Because they keep those contracts forever,
Oh,
and
no. Yeah.
the next Black Panther movie might not be till like 2028 or something, and she's
Ri
gonna be like, what, 73 or something? So she might have been like, "No, I'm done."
Yeah, right.
Um,
Yeah.
so that was a gut punch.
Mhm.
I liked Riri. There was not a lot of her, but I did really like her, and I'm excited for the show. I think
Mhm.
I have been confused about this Riri since her announcement, and then when they said in the show that she was 19, I was like, "Okay, so they're aging her up, and that's
Right.
okay." But
Right.
I thought we were getting an origin story TV show, but
Right.
okay. So
Yeah.
I don't know how they're gonna do that. I
Mhm.
loved her in the movie though,
Mhm.
and the music was incredible. I do feel like I liked the cinematography a little bit more of the first Black Panther than this one. This
Mhm.
one felt dark. 3 viewings, 3 completely different theaters. I felt that it was very color-wise, the coloring was very, very dark.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
the only thing I would, mention from that. But story-wise, uh, where we started, the journey that we took, where we ended, and then, I bawled. I knew that Feige and them weren't gonna just let us leave this and not have another T'Challa, like, I knew it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
how they were gonna do it, I didn't know, but giving us a child and then also making him Haitian, like, I just bawled because the people that I know like, people I know that are Haitian are going through so much right now, if anybody's been paying attention to the news,
Right.
and just they need this, their kids need this. That's just, like, a
Mhm.
huge, and, um, the last thing I'll say about the movie is I think it should have been titled World of Wakanda because we really were all over the world,
Right.
and we were in, Haiti, Cape Verde, Obviously the United States, um, jumping around Wakanda,
Hmm.
and even, so I thought it was really interesting how we weren't so much in Wakanda this time. This
Right.
was all the outside France, the UN, things like that. We were all
Hmm.
outside. This is the outside looking in. Um, but I really enjoyed it. I really loved the world building of it.
Hmm.
They did depart from the comics. They had to because Chadwick is gone.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but I'm excited to see what's next. I'm just also fascinated that Phase 4 started with Black Widow and ended with Black Panther,
Hmm.
and they're both characters that are gone.
Right.
And it's just all about like their past. Like I just find that fascinating.
Right, right. Yeah, it's like a story of legacy, basically, that we're seeing. Especially, I think I read somewhere that Kevin Feige said that Phase 4 is all about introductions, and the fact that these introductions are built on, the OG characters, I think is really a fascinating way of being able to project some of these new characters into, Phase 5 and beyond. But I'm with you as well too. I gotta say this. I have a personal story of I lost my dog like a couple months ago, and I don't know
I'm
why.
sorry.
Thank you. I don't know why, but it's really hit me like really hard, like to the point where like I'm still like I'll be honest, like I still battling depression, and
Yeah,
so
I lost my cat at the beginning of the year, and it was just one of those things, and every time I see a little black cat, I'm like, "Ah,"
yes, I know.
I can't. I mean, on TikTok, the one of the posts that went viral was me and my cat, and,
Oh yeah,
and he's not with me anymore, and it's tough.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and I'm still battling that. And so for this movie to be about like, grief and seeing Shuri, just like you said, like not she's trying to process it, but she's still not able to move beyond it. And that's all this whole movie is. My wife and I talked about the movie after we watched it, and she made a really good point that in the first Black Panther movie, Shuri was the comedic relief, basically, right? Like she
Yeah.
cracked a lot of jokes. She was funny. In this movie, she did crack jokes, but not as often. And there wasn't that good balance of comedic relief that we had in the first Black Panther, because Shuri was the one who's going through all this. She lost her father, she just lost her brother. Then the movie, she lost her mother as well too. And so to get hit with all of these very traumatic, very grief-stricken events that happened to her, and not being able, just like you said, to have time to grieve, even though Namor said, go grieve your dead and everything.
Woo! When
She
he
didn't
said
have time to
that,
do that. Yeah.
he
I know
was
that was
like
cold. Yeah.
he was like, you are the captain now." I was like,
Yeah.
"Damn."
I know.
I
Yeah.
was
That was
like,
that.
"Damn." But
Yeah.
listen, and that is why I've told people like, "Oh, Namor is an anti-hero." I'm like, "No, after he killed Ramonda, he was a villain.
Right.
He was
Yeah.
a villain." And I need people to understand that. Like, no, you took out Angela Bassett. Nope, 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 nope.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think a lot of people are gonna find those moments of emotional release in this movie
Hmm.
because so many of us haven't been able to do that. That's why so many critics are like, "Yeah, it was really long, but I mean, it was good though,"
Right.
because they know that it's taking you on a journey.
Yeah.
And that's what I really, really appreciate. And I also love a lot of the visual nuances, the stuff that wasn't said, like things like even Namor was born, we've seen that in the trailer, but like then
Hmm.
he was a child, and then they do that transition, and his mother's like 90, and he's still a child,
Hmm.
and it's because he's aging so slowly.
Right.
But and it was like, oh my God, he's Yoda, like he's 50 when he's a child. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
he was so young.
Hmm.
So it looks like a child is attacking this village, and then how they came up with the origin of his name, like,
Right.
Niño sin amor, like a
Hmm.
child without love, and he's like, "That's why I took my name," and I was like, "Oh, I love that."
Yes.
Because in the comics, it was like, "Oh, it's just Ramon spelled backwards." I'm like, "What? No, they better not do that."
Yeah.
So, it was moments like that, even other little things, like when they visit Riri in the dorm,
Hmm.
and Okoye's like, little girl, you can either come with us, conscious or unconscious." And she's like, "Get away from me." And she's like waving that heater at them, that little
Yeah.
portable heater. And they're like, "Oh, let's leave her here. And she can like fight Namor herself with her little heater." But then later, that's exactly how they fight him. with a
Right.
heater,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know?
yeah.
So there's all these little, like, just not just Easter eggs, but just little things that I just loved, throughout the film, and the fact that, it took me 3 watches to catch this.
Mm-hmm.
Toussaint T'Challa, like, her nephew,
Mm-hmm.
he greeted Ramonda at the school. When Ramonda first went to the school
Yes.
and the 3 little kids came up,
Yeah.
he's the one that was like, you're here to see the school," 'cause he knew her. 'Cause he knew
Yeah.
her, which means, like, he knows his grandmother, she's come to visit.
Yeah.
He's talked to her, he knew exactly who she was, he spoke to her. So, I thought that was fascinating too because it shows you exactly what children can. I mean, I don't have any kids, but what children I feel like can understand if you just tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many different cultures that believe that children are close to the other side so that you can explain death to them and they just get it.
Right.
It's just um and so I just thought that it was just very lyrically done, very yes, an emotional journey.
Mm-hmm.
Were there parts that could have gone faster? Yes. Were there parts that could have been shorter? Yes. But
Mm-hmm.
for the overall, I really, really enjoyed the movie, and it's an experience.
Right. Right. Well, I agree. Like, even though it was almost 3 hours for me, like it didn't really feel like it was 3 hours. Similar to, how people said the Batman didn't feel like 3 hours. Like for me, that's the same way with this one is I didn't really feel like things were dragged out to the point that you felt it being dragged out. I think they all had a purpose in
They
connecting
did.
with what's coming up, and I've been hearing that criticism about it being a little too long, but for me, it wasn't an issue at all, just because.
Right. And like I said, was it long? Yes. Should it have been? Yes. Like you
Yeah,
needed that stuff to settle. If that was all sped up and you were just hit with things,
yeah,
after a while you wouldn't feel them anymore.
exactly.
Because you'd just be like, okay, I'm shutting down now. Like I'm just
Yeah,
being bombarded.
right.
The other thing is I heard somebody say that this movie didn't make them feel anything, but the Batman really was emotional for them. Then I'm like, I don't understand you. I don't know where you're from. I don't know where your people are from. You should get that checked out
Yeah,
because I don't understand how you can walk out of this movie and say you don't feel anything.
yeah. I mean, it's especially this is the kind of movie where it itself as a movie is definitely powerful, but we have to go beyond what it meant beyond the film of losing Chadwick Boseman and what it meant for so many people who look at Black Panther as something that they can connect to and all those things. It's similar. I kind of compare it to Spider-Man No Way Home, because for a lot of people, they got to see the Spider-Man that they grew up in on the big
Right.
screen in the
Right.
MCU now. With this, it's the same thing where like there is an external, impact for people who are coming in and, just have all these things they're already bringing to the table when they're watching the movie, that it has a lot of emotional impact. I did not cry when I watched it, but I teared up in so
Yeah.
many places, that just because, especially how they handle such a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, at the beginning, throughout the movie,
Oh
especially at the
yeah,
end with Shuri.
in the beginning when the credits come up and it's silent
Yes.
and it's just because we're
Yes.
always so used to hearing the Marvel music and it's just silent and it's just images of him. I was like, okay, y'all just decided to break me. It
Yeah.
just was and yeah, at the end when she's remembered, the only thing that made me sad about the end was I really feel like they should have done a thing where they remembered Ramonda also because
Right.
she also died. I felt like if we could shift some time in there somewhere, that if we could have given a little bit more time to her funeral and to her passing, because
Mhm.
I felt like kind of like she's gone, she's buried, now we're on to the next. And I was like, wait,
Like Black Widow and Endgame, how like there was
yes,
no funeral for her, but we had
exactly.
one for Iron Man, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was just one of those that was an odd choice. And
Right.
so but I did get excited about seeing some of the stuff that was in my book even though my book is only related to the comics, I was like, wait, they pulled a lot from the comics with the
Yes.
Dora Milaje in there. So I was excited about that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when because we were talking about this before we started recording, when the scene where Okoye, gets stripped of her ranking and everything, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly like what happened to Mr. Zola in your book. almost like word for word, because that's, obviously the context is different because it was when T'Challa went missing, but this time it was Shuri went missing, and the responsibility fell on Okoye. And again, it was so emotional of a movie that you felt the emotions in so many places. Like when,
I mean, they left the camera on her for a lot of
yes,
that. Like, and then it was honestly nobody. I don't remember anybody else being in that room. I just remember Denai Guerrera and
yeah,
Angela
Angela
Bassett. I don't.
Bassett, yeah,
It's just and the funny thing about that is in my book, that's another example of a thread that I connected, because in Evan Narcis's Black Panther run, he wrote that story of T'Challa going missing and Ramonda finding him, but T'Chaka disbanding the Dora and getting rid of the Dora because he was so upset that they lost his child.
right.
Um, and they didn't name the Dora. They didn't name the Dora that had got, and that was something that I got to do. So it's sort of like I was able to weave together two different parts of the Black Panther universe, and that was really exciting for me. And then, yes, that version, when I saw it in the movie, I was like, "Oh my god, it's like the same thing. It's like an echo," you know?
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
thought that was fantastic.
Yeah. That was really cool. Yeah. And I just, like I was saying before, it was, yeah, it was just so, what was really great about this movie is that you got a lot of grieving processes and a lot of emotions coming from so many different people, that, you got to see how Okoye was grieving through some of this in that moment. You saw Ramonda, grieving in so many different places. Shuri just, not in a good place throughout the whole movie. It was so powerful in that it as an audience member, you were living vicariously through that, because I think we all didn't get a chance. I think Ryan Coogler actually said this, and this is where I'm coming from, is that we didn't get really a chance to say goodbye to T'Challa, and that movie was that, basically,
Yep.
was
Yep.
was kind of leaving that legacy and everything. I will say my biggest criticism of the movie, uh, that I would have to say, is that Shuri's turn from being so enraged with her experiences and with her grief that she wanted to kill Namor, which, by the way, I thought it was brilliant how they brought back Killmonger and how he was a reflection of how she was feeling, because now she became Black Panther because of everything that's happened, and she didn't have time to process the grief. And so it made a lot of sense for her to meet him and nobody else in the ancestral plane because of where she was at. Mostly, like, I love that symbolism that they had in there. I thought it was a great way of them doing that. But in the final battle scene, I think my biggest gripe was that she kind of flipped the switch a little too quick for me. I don't think it really led into, her being so enraged and so furious by what's happened to her because of Namor, that all of a sudden, Ramona for me kind of came out of nowhere, and she didn't
Yeah,
have a chance to
that's the
process
part.
that.
That's yeah, and I thought the interesting thing about that was I wish she was able to have seen Ramonda as well, but it does kind of make sense why she didn't, because she was dealing with anger.
Right.
Also, and again, this is another comic book cut. When T'Challa became King of the Dead and started that whole concept of accessing your previous Black Panthers,
Hmm.
he would talk to each of them, and Shuri did this too. When Shuri in the comics, she she was in a coma, basically, a comatose state, and her spirit started walking the plains of Jalia. She
Right.
was able to come back with this happened in the comics, not the movies. She
Right.
was able to come back with characteristics
Hmm.
of people she'd met and characteristics of so the anger made sense for Killmonger. I like the fact that she what and I feel like there's something that was left on the cutting room floor. I feel like we heard Ramonda's voice when Namor stabbed her.
Hmm.
I wish we saw her there.
Right.
And then we saw her again, so that way it wouldn't have seemed so, "Wait, she's just popping up." So I
Right.
think because if she's stabbed and, her life is sort of ebbing and flowing, even though the suit was clearly keeping her alive,
Hmm.
um, but before she pulled herself off of that pole,
Hmm.
that stake, I think that had we seen Ramonda's face and not just heard her voice, more connection would have been made, and
Right.
she started calling for her mother then. And then when she was about to kill him, because she'd never killed anybody before, so she
Right.
was calling for her mother's help again. And then, so I do think that we should have seen Ramonda more than once in that scene, and
Right.
not just that one time.
Right.
Um, and I think it would have led to, okay, she's changing a little bit, as
Mhm.
opposed to she just changed.
Right.
Um, it was an interesting, and again, if Ramonda wasn't dead, I would see more of the change. Like, you hurt my mother and I'm gonna take you out. But then
Right.
it's like, if she could have seen, or her mother spoke to her through her bead, like, don't kill this man. You know what I mean?
Right.
If she was alive, it would have, I think, had more gravitas. I mean, I just wanted to see her recover and be in Haiti and walk through the door with the child. Or when she goes there, she sees her in bed and
Mhm.
playing with the boy. Like, I just didn't want
I
uh
know.
her to leave this franchise. But
Right.
I understand choices were made and we don't know what all those choices were. But I do agree with you that it felt a little, especially for as long as that fight scene was, it did
Mhm.
feel a little jarring, and it would have been less jarring had we seen Ramonda more.
Right. Well, and I think what really solidified for me as to why it was such an abrupt change in that final fight scene was her conversation with M'Baku. Because her conversation with M'Baku was that, like, she was scary because she was like, "I'm gonna go kill him, and you're gonna help me." And M'Baku, like, did not fight her or try to change her mind
Yeah, because
because he was scared.
That was Killmonger coming through, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and so, like, the fact that she was so, blindly enraged by what had happened to her, rightfully so, like, it for me, I think you're right, like, if Ramonda wasn't dead, but was in a coma or something like that, then there's a lot more cushion for her to not be, as fueled by her hatred with Namor at the moment, and that it could have been a little bit more subtle and more, progression in terms of that, switch to compassion. But
I also think if her HUD, if her helmet,
yes,
what when she was impaled, if Griot had shown her all of the people dying, all
right,
of the people on the ship dying, it would have given her an impetus, like, "Oh, right, there's other people."
right,
Um,
yeah,
so
yeah,
I don't this is not Letitia Wright's performance.
mhm,
My issue was the editing in that section. Like, I
yes,
would have shown other things
yeah,
just to get her to that point. So yeah,
yes,
I had the same argument there. The argument about, oh, there's no way she could have fought Namor and won. I'm like, yes, there is, because even in the comics, she had to dry him out to
yeah,
beat him.
right,
That was also in Doom War.
yeah,
She had to dry him out to beat him, and but she didn't kill him.
mhm,
But and it's funny because there's a set of beads that were in that run that I included in the book. They basically they can surround somebody and take all
oh, that's
the
right,
water out of the air, and they were created for
that's right,
Namor.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, there was just all these the daggers, like Aneka's daggers. I was like,
yeah,
yes, these are in the thing. And obviously, the moment I saw the Midnight Angel suit, I started
oh
yelling
my
because
god,
I was
yeah,
like,
I know.
so
I
yeah,
gotta say,
I
when I was watching that part, I was like, I can't wait to talk to Karama about this because I'm sure she's gonna flip out about that whole thing. It's just so cool seeing that, so
but even their personalities, I love the fact that, like, Okoye was like, "No, we use the spear," and Aneka's like, "Okay, but I like these," because and that's kind of like in the book, the different personalities.
Mhm.
Because in the book, Io doesn't, for instance, you hear Okoye say, "I don't like," all the time, "Ugh, guns, so primitive."
But pretty, yeah.
And Io's like, "They're not primitive. It's just like, if we've got bullets that are made of vibranium, we gotta go dig those out. I'm not doing that." So it's just like different reasons for,
Right.
but yeah,
Mhm.
I was really excited. This was a very woman-centric movie, and I love that.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love the whole scene at the UN
Mhm.
juxtaposed with the French commandos trying to, like, steal vibranium.
Right.
I loved the whole Dora coming out of the vault, and
Mhm.
bringing them into the UN.
Oh, yeah.
I think the only other issue that I thought, not issue, just storyline that was very strange to me in the movie was Ross. Ross,
Yes.
and I was like, okay, like I understood Ross's purpose, but I was like, you were married to? I
He
keep
was,
saying her name like De La Fontaine.
yeah, yeah. Valentina, right?
Yeah, Valentina. I was like, you were
Yeah,
married to Valentina? Okay, that is new. And
yeah,
then also like, well, if you were married to her and you're divorced now, you know she's a terrible person.
yeah.
So why would you trust,
Right.
it was just
Yeah.
one of those really strange things. But now the question is, because here's the thing. Okoye, at the end of this movie, Okoye is in the United States in Midnight Angel's armor rescuing Ross. Is that the new show?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ross and Okoye, you know,
Another
buddy
buddy,
cop, right?
buddy cop
Another buddy
show.
cop thing. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you're right, because I felt like, as much as I love Everett Ross, he definitely felt more like a device to set up Valentina as more of a central
Exactly.
figure in MCU than like why she was in the show. Because it's one of those things where if you had left that part out, it still would have been fine as a show, like a movie. Like nothing would have really been falling apart or anything like that, like because they could have written. I mean, honestly, they could have figured out where Riri was at without Ross. It was just more of like, that was convenient. He owes us a favor. He's going to save us some time in doing that and everything like that. But, have you let that whole storyline out, the movie would still made a lot of sense. And so I think it was just more of a story device to kind of start, stitching Valentina in with, the Thunderbolts project they're going to have later on. And it may be a big role in the MCU and everything. But yeah, it was kind of an odd thing to see.
I call that an Ultron moment,
Yeah.
because Age of Ultron is my least favorite MCU movie. Well, no, it might be Thor: The Dark World, but
Hmm.
but I really Ultron is up there. But when I had to get to Endgame to realize its importance, because if you
Right.
go back and you watch Age of Ultron, it's setting up everything in
Yes.
Endgame and everything. I'm like, oh well, okay, the entire movie is like a thing,
Right.
but I definitely thought Namor's concept of protecting his people and just showing how old he
Yes.
is was really, really brilliant. I also like the fact that he, after, meeting with Shuri, he was like, yeah, listen, it's not about the scientist anymore. We got the scientist. I don't have to kill her. I just need her to not make more things that people
Right.
can use against us. I don't have
Right.
to kill her. Like, but what I am going to do is take out the surface world that they keep coming for us,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I just thought that was his reasoning made sense. And again, I was with him as an anti-hero until he took out Angela.
I know. Well, and it's really interesting because, especially the movie poster, how the movie, the poster just shows how their their viewpoints are kind of similar in terms of they're about their people first and protecting their people first. But for Shuri, their people is beyond Wakanda. Like, yes, Wakandans are their people first and foremost, but they do see themselves as part of the greater world now that T'Challa had opened Wakanda up to the world, that we saw at the end of Black Panther. Whereas, Namor is still protective of his people, and rightfully so, because of his experiences that he's had and what's happened and everything
Mhm.
like that. So it was very fascinating to see that moment with Shuri, seeing everything that's in Talokan, of the people, and then using that really cool callback at the end before she decides to kill him, to see how there's so many parallels between her people and their people, and that it took that meaning to really appreciate that and to come to an understanding. And that's one of the things I really loved about that scene in that movie, is that it was a moment where two peoples who didn't really know each other or only just heard each other could really come together and potentially be able to create peace and get to know each other from different cultures. Even though they're very different, there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of things that they can be empathetic with each other. And I think that was just so what's the word I'm looking for? Gosh, I forget what, aspirational
Mhm.
of what we can do as humanity, is to try to be able to come to the table and get to know each other and understand each other and have that empathy. And so I love that scene. And of course, that got botch when Nakia saved her and everything. But I just thought it was a really powerful story that they told that I thought was necessary for the movie to be able to do the rest of the parts, which again, I think, there's so many parts that were a little bit long. And that's why the movie was long. But as we talked about, it was very necessary because had you taken that part out, Namor would just been another, I'm a villain with, I'm with no depth, basically, like
Yeah,
I'm a villain because I'm going to take you out because I hate everything, basically, and this kind of
exactly.
gave, more depth and more layers to why he's doing those things. And then obviously when that happened, he felt betrayed. And that's why, he became a villain and everything. So,
But
yeah.
the last thing I will say is that I also like the way that they tied Namor's origin story to Wakanda through vibranium. Because
Hmm.
also in the book, although I don't have his version because I this is new to the MCU.
Right.
There's 5 different versions of vibranium in the comics, and so and it did drop all over the world.
Hmm.
That's part of the point. There's a one that exists in the North Pole as well. So
Right.
there's all kinds of so it makes perfect sense that a meteor would have landed underwater. But I also love the fact that there's some type of spiritual element to both people who are connected to their land and connected to their ancestors, and they were
Hmm.
told through those spiritual practices how to use this herb, in a very similar way, but in 2 different places.
Right.
And just
Right.
the fact why they're and, just even explaining everything, like why they're blue. Well, they don't have oxygen, so they're turning blue because they can't breathe, and then they get in the
Hmm.
water and they're not blue anymore. Like,
Right.
I thought a lot of that was handled really, really well. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm gonna have to watch the movie a few more times to, make my
Appreciate all
full.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was done really, really well. I mean, right through the end credits with watching the fabric that burns
Hmm.
uh into that turns into the Black Panther suit or her suit. Um and honestly, I'm excited. I just wrote an article for Mashable about T'Challa's various children in the comics
Hmm.
in different timelines, and I the one I'm gravitating towards now is the Azari timeline of the new Avengers, and it was a situation where all of the Avengers, because of in his timeline, Ultron won and
Hmm.
took out the Avengers, and this is all of the kids
Right.
of a lot of the leaders. And I think it was an animated movie. I think you can still watch it somewhere.
Hmm.
But there was definitely a comic, and we are already in a multiverse. We got
Hmm.
Kang coming up, so
Right.
there's literally no reason why we can't meet a T'Challa in a different timeline. We've already seen it in What If,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, and the next generation of the MCU is going to be kids. I
Hmm.
mean, we've got everybody. We've got Cassie Lang, we've got Kate Bishop, Hawkeye, we've
Right.
got um even Heimdall's kid
Yeah.
now, Axel,
Yeah.
um we've got and then even Isaiah Bradley's grandson,
Yeah.
who we don't know yet in the MCU whether or not he inherited his father, serum from his father. We don't know.
Right.
So it would make a lot of sense if there was also like a kid T'Challa,
Hmm.
just because the franchise at the end of the day is for kids.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
but I have had so much fun talking about all this because I've been geeking out over this movie for the past week and a half or so,
Yeah.
and I was like, I could finally talk to people about it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, this was a good conversation to talk about the movie and what it's meant and everything. I did have some people who also shared their thoughts I want to share with our listeners as well too. So the ODPH podcast said it's a welcome introduction to Namor and the MCU mixed with fantastic action scenes to balance out the emotional moments. Another Marvel Studios hit. Baron Hendricks from Instagram said, I watched Black Panther Wakanda Forever twice already, watching it a third time today, actually, of this recording. This movie is a masterpiece from beginning to end. This whole movie felt like a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, from the representation from different cultures, such as Mesoamerican Mayan culture to the Afro-American. This movie had it all. The action sequences and the music were an amazing addition. With the scene, you could feel every emotion from everyone. This movie ties well with the rest of the MCU. Can't wait to see Ironheart's roles in the future. Said hoping the champions, and also Talokin's role in the future of the MCU. JT from Beyond the Fandoms podcast said a beautiful, powerful sequel to the amazing 2018 film that deals with the stages of grief, loss, and love. Two nations who are not so different as you might think. He's seen it twice already and gets better after the second time. And Mr. Marvel 613 said, I was very impressed, to be honest, how they handled Chadwick's passing when I saw the movie, more about overcoming grief and moving on. So it sounds like, a lot of things we had talked about, was also very powerful for people who watch it as well too. And we had a lot of agreements on those as well. So thank you for everybody who shared their thoughts on the movie. So let's go ahead and end this episode with comics that we're currently reading. So, Karama, what comic book are you reading right now that you want to share with us?
Oh, it's funny because I was thinking about the future comics that I want to read. Okay, so the comics I'm actually reading right now. I am reading Wakanda for obvious reasons, but also because the writer Evan Narcisse is the writer that wrote that T'Chaka story I was telling you about, the one where T'Challa gets lost, and you learn about his whole backstory.
Mm-hmm.
He also wrote an amazing book that's out right now called the Wakanda Atlas. Which is a topographical map of every area. And I tell people, if you like my book, buy his too, and then have them together. If you're fun, if you like historical fiction, somebody just told me that they're gonna buy both and do a role-playing game, because between my book and his book,
that's so
I was
cool.
Like, send me that game, because that's amazing. And because it's got it's beautifully rendered too. It's bigger. It's physically bigger than my book. And so you get to see all in beautiful color, all these different areas of Wakanda and stuff. So I want to support. And so I've been reading that. I see that one comic that I'm looking forward to is Scotty Young is returning with I Hate Fairyland. I interviewed Scotty Young years ago, and he's a great guy. And he had he does a lot of those chibi variants of the Marvel characters. But I Hate Fairyland is literally, he basically did a retelling at one point of Alice in Wonderland. It was an Alice in Wonderland comic book, and he basically OD'd on that comic, on that story, and was like, I never want to see Alice in Wonderland again. And I Hate Fairyland happened was about a girl that was just trapped in Fairyland and can't get out. And she's psychotic. She's done everything. She's bombs, weapons, guns. But because it's Fairyland, all the weapons and things like that turn into poofy things, and all the people that she's trying to kill, and she can't curse. It's kind of like The Good Place, like Holy Mother 4 King shirt balls. She can't say, and so she's it's really, really funny. She's returning because she's aged up a little bit, which has been tough because she's basically been stuck in Fairyland for hundreds of years at this point. And so I look forward to see, because it's ridiculous. And because his artwork is so detailed and so bananas, it just ends up being a lot of fun. So yeah, I Hate Fairyland is another one. And I'm actually, between writing the book and a lot of stuff that's going on this year, I actually am behind on my indie comic reading. So I'm going to be going back to play catch up on a lot of runs as well.
Right. Well, you're not a comic book reader unless you have an unread pile, right?
Oh my God. I've got an unread stack over here.
Yeah. I have a whole bookcase of them. Yeah, I get you. No, that's awesome. So the comics that I'm currently reading, right now I'm reading Dark Knights of Steel from DC Comics, written by Tom Taylor.
And he's amazing.
Oh my gosh. I've been reading his Superman Son of Kal-El story. I've only read the first few issues, but I absolutely loved it. And I didn't realize when I started getting this that he also wrote this one as well too. And I can see why DC just made him an exclusive, because he's just banging out just a lot of great stories. And this is just a prime example of one, because it takes place in medieval times. So it's like a what if story of what if, Kal-El and his parents came to Earth around, I think 1500s, 1600s. And it has all the, same DC characters that you've seen. Batman's is in there. Wonder Woman's in there. Kara-El is in there, although she's like a sister to Kal-El as opposed to a cousin. But it's all in medieval times. So it's really cool to see this story that he's created played out. And he has a lot of fun with it because he can kind of pretty much do whatever he wants, and I don't, and it's not like really, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really interesting, and a very like cool dramatization of everything, and so it's a really good one. It's one of those things. I have all 8 issues so far, and I started last night. And the only reason why I didn't finish it is because I got really tired and went to bed. But it's like as soon as I finished one issue, I had to read the next one. So it's really good. I recommend if you like any of the DC comics or Tom Taylor one, that is definitely a series to pick up. So
awesome.
Yeah. And then some of the listeners have shared what they're reading. Joe Loves Comics said, I just finished reading the first trade of Black Science and really enjoyed it. I'm excited to read more, which I have not heard of Black Science. Have you heard of that one before?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think because the cover, I was struck by the cover when I first saw it, but it's a Rick Remender story, and Rick Remender is very good. So I mean that. Again, on the to read pile.
Exactly. Yeah. JT from Beyond the Fandom podcast said he's currently reading Captain America Judgment Day right now. The Cap book was so good. There's a 5-page fight scene with no dialogue and just action between 2 characters. And it was awesome. So I got to talk to him about that sometime. But that sounds, if you can do like a 5-page fight with no dialogue and make it really intriguing like that, that says volumes about the artwork of being able to do that sort of thing. And so that actually captured my attention of what he said there. So that'd be really cool to check out.
And by the way, just a comment about Black Science. It came out in 2013. Like it's not necessarily new.
Right.
And I love it when you can just read something that's finished. Like I was recommending 100 Bullets to somebody the other day, which is epic if you haven't read that. Mm-hmm. And 100 Bullets is another one. It was like, because I'm running into a lot of people who are like, I want to get into comics, but I'm not waiting.
Right.
I want to read the whole thing. I don't want to wait till next month. And I'm like, okay. So I've been like talking about a lot of graphic novels. So Black Science is another one it's finished. And that's why if you want to go read it, it's a good one to jump into.
Yeah, definitely. I call it the Netflix effect, right? Because we just like to binge everything. Some people are okay with getting an issue in a month, and some people are like, I'm waiting until the trade comes out, then I'll just read it all one sitting. So yeah.
Yep.
And then last but not least, Andy Larson from the Last Comic Shop podcast said, I've started collecting the 2001 series Jack Kirby did for Marvel back in the mid 70s, which I knew it was a movie. I did not realize it was a comic book series from Jack Kirby.
Wow.
Yeah. So that you learn something new every day, right? Like other stuff from this era, like Kamandi and Devil Dinosaur, Kirby's unique mixing of the prehistoric and futuristic is something that needs to be experienced. So thank you everybody for sharing what comics you're reading. Karama, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about your book and to talk about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Before I let you go, would you like to share with us where people can find you online as well as your work or anything else you want to share?
Sure. You can find me, TheBlerdGurl, TheBlerdGurl, all over the interwebs. I'm still kind of on Twitter until it explodes. And then I'm on TikTok as well as Instagram. Please check out Black Panther Protectors of Wakanda, History and Training Manual of the Dora Milaje. You can buy it wherever you get your books. If you would like a signed copy, you can go to TheBlerdGurl.com and or actually click on any of my bios on social, and there's a way to get your hands on one. I'm getting a new shipment in next week, so the next set of signed books can go out. Please also listen to my other podcast through Travel Channel called Pop Paranormal. It's a horror podcast that I do with my sweetie Chuck, and we talk about horror movies. And
nice.
And we often talk to like the creators behind them and things like that. And it's sort of like a Mulder and Scully situation. Like I'm the one who's like looking at it from like a film critic perspective, and he's like, let me explain the blood spatter in this one, so it's really a fun time. So if you get a chance, please listen to Pop Paranormal. And just keep following me. I have some other projects in the works that I can't talk about yet, but at the top of the year, there's going to be another big thing that I get to drop, and I can't wait to talk about it. So yeah, and
Awesome.
I'm gonna be doing more stuff like you. I'm gonna be trying to go live more and stuff on TikTok, and just trying to, as we coast through the end of the year, just hang out with people more.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes as well too. So
Thank you.
yeah, well, thank you very much. And again, thanks for coming on the show, and best of luck with your projects and everything. I'm very excited to see what comes out of that.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that wraps up another episode of The Caption Life. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can follow us on social media at Caption Life. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionlife.com.